Right. Yeah. So, what do you think about like I'm not sure if you heard about. Well, I am sure you heard about this because we just talked about it. But the peace deal between UAE and Israel, because I don't know a lot about it. I know that Israel was like planning to annex the UAE or something. Is like,
Oh, I haven't heard about that. I knew that both countries are kind of I mean, they're both allied with the United States, but they weren't allied with each other. So even though, I mean, it's kind of a proxy, like the US kind of said, yeah, like you have to kind of agree with us. You have to whatever, like let's get this done. I think it's a big deal because I mean, part of it was that Muslims can come worship in holy sites in Israel. That Israel won't declare those sovereign and like block people out, which I think is big. And I think even though they're kind of proxies for the United States, that doing that is a step in a direction for a more stable relations in the Middle East between Israel and those countries.
Israel and Palestine. What are your thoughts?
That's that's really difficult. I think the best solution, and I don't know how you do it, is I subscribe a little bit to the two state, like just having two separate states, but with super loose kind of travel between the two. Because I mean there's holy religious sites all along that area. So it's difficult to give either population complete control. But I think both parties want their own state. It's a super difficult issue.
So here's what I think. I'll be coy. Here's what really pisses me off as a liberal is the Liberal Party, the Democratic Party is very quick to criticize the difference of opinion of people in the United States. For example, you're homophobic if you don't support gay marriage. I support gay marriage.
It's if you
say the wrong word, like not the wrong word, but if you use the wrong phrase, like you could be anti-Semitic or racist, like the bar is so low nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
But then they'll go out and they'll support like Palestine becoming, one state with just Palestine, and getting rid of Israel isn't a real state. Like the liberals will defend this, but it's like, you guys do realize that like homosexuals are literally stoned in Palestine.
Yeah, I mean, there's issues with.
I said Palestine. It's Palestine, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
For some reason, I was thinking Pakistan.
But
like, come on, like there are human rights violations going on in the Middle East, and you guys are defending those as like just a different culture, which it is. But look, you can't defend human rights in the United States, and you can't defend human rights in the United States and not defend human rights overseas. Like the stuff that they do to homosexuals in Pakistan, Palestine, Saudi Arabia, UAE, like these are not acceptable for the 21st century, and this is stuff that needs to be stopped. Now, for example, in Saudi Arabia, women can now drive as of last year. Like this stuff
that's crazy.
Like Israel, this is why I've always been, I don't want to say pro-Israel because I just am not that informed on the topic.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just don't have a full understanding of the history and conflict between the region, but I've always been more on the side of Israel just because they have a democracy that is based, they don't have a lot of human rights violations. I mean, granted, their military like is defending the border with what's the country? It may just be like, I don't know, but
yeah, there's
I know their military
issues.
has
there's issues for sure.
Some issues, but as far as like homosexuality in the region, that's something that I think is very important, and I mean it's completely legal in Israel and in Palestine. like it's outlawed. In
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia, it's outlawed in all these countries.
Yeah,
China.
it's a super difficult question because I understand where people are coming from. It seems harsh to say, like they took that land away from Palestinians, when they made Israel a state. But to me, it's a similar. I think you just have to. I think it's hard to do, but I think you have to drop the past a little bit. Like that's the only way to move forward is to drop what's happened and say, okay, we need to normalize relations between the two parties and try and figure out how to work out an agreement where we can have these two countries and people can coexist peacefully, and there's all these religious sites that are super important to both peoples, and you need to be able to find a way.
They've tried to, though. They've tried to, and the Palestinians won't come to the table.
So that's where I'm a little bit optimistic from this peace deal that we were originally talking about with the UAE and Israel, is even though it's a small step, I think it's still a step in the right direction, right? Because you're normalizing relations between a Muslim country and Israel, and by doing that, I think you open up the door to doing that in other places. To say, and now it's not this negotiation between Israel and this other country. You can bring the UAE in and say, hey, we did it. It works. Like, our people can go worship at these holy places. Like, wouldn't you like that too? And slowly, I mean, that's a huge deal, I think.
Yeah. And I want to clarify. I don't believe, like if that is their culture, I am totally supportive of their culture. But that being said, I believe that there are some aspects of culture, even the culture in the United States, we should change. Like the culture, there are cultures around the world that, like, I think have ideas that are rooted in things that shouldn't still happen.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, maybe I can get your thoughts. Maybe I'm alone in this, but there should be UN resolution, there should be something, there should be some sort of like remedy for not remedy, but there should be some sort of like punishment for countries that openly like stone gays, or like openly stone people who have sex before marriage, or a woman that doesn't wear a burqa when she leaves the home. I realize those are all aspects of culture, but I'm like very supportive of like free will and, you know, being able to do these things in these countries. Like, I feel like that's almost not even a culture argument at that point.
Yeah, and it's difficult because I'm super. I mean, other cultures are like, amazing. I mean, there's a lot of this stuff on this wall is from other places, other cultures, and I think there are aspects about every culture that are beautiful and amazing to experience, and we can learn from. But when those cultures start infringing on kind of, other people's, not so much lives, but their basic human rights.
Yeah, and
I think that's where you have to step in and say, you know what, as we respect your beliefs, but these people, you shouldn't have a government that is going to, kill people for living their life.
Yeah, and for example, like when I was religious, I openly criticized and still openly criticize the way that my former church treated homosexuality and like African Americans. Like I still do openly criticize those things. And I'll be completely fair about criticizing the United States. I'll be fair about criticizing the Middle East. I'll be fair about criticizing China, because there's always going to be things that need to be changed. I will say that in the Western world, there's not gays that get stoned to death.
Yeah, and I think.
But on that same note, there are African Americans in the United States that get killed for zero reason by cops.
Yeah, and there's problems. And I think where there's... Yeah, and that's where I like part from the culture argument and saying, oh, it's this culture, is I think culture is great to have, but when it's you get fundamentalists that are, we have this culture, we're not going to change, that's where you end up with major problems. You need to be able to change and adapt to, I mean, and obviously it's horrible that stuff happens, but you have to come from somewhere and work towards a better place. So I think it's a weird argument that people say, oh, it's just their culture, like you should respect all cultures, there's no bad culture, because to look at it with that kind of black and white, like good or evil, I don't think there's any culture that's inherently, at least when we're talking about like other countries, like I think there's definitely like cultures in the sense like office culture. I mean, there's bad stuff, like cultures there that are completely bad, but
what's office culture?
If someone, people will say an office has a culture of this, and that's a completely different thing. I shouldn't have even brought it up. But I just like other countries, cultures from other countries and peoples. Yeah. I don't think any are inherently good, like all good or all bad. Right. You have to take the good parts and learn from them, and like show those, and then take the bad parts and work to change that.
Right. Right. Going back to the Palestine thing, I think if I believe it would be a good idea for Palestine to have a free state and to like a two-state system. That being said, I think there are a lot of things that both countries have to give up, and I don't know if either country is ready to give up those things.
But but you've got to get there. It's about, all that stuff is about
how? It's not going to be Trump that's going to do it. Yeah, and it's certainly not going to be Joe Biden that's going to do it.
I think that's why, I mean, I keep going back to this, but I think that what just happened with Israel and the United Arab Emirates, I think that's huge.
I think Trump did play a role in that.
I think he did play a role in that, and I think that's huge to normalize relations between Israel and a primarily Muslim country like that. Yeah. Even though it's, even though they're both already allied with the United States, and kind of that's a little bit different than, say, Syria or Palestine, that area. But I think it's a step in the right direction that can serve as a model for other countries and other people to start working that out. And maybe Palestine is the last puzzle piece to fit into that. But I think it's a lot easier to get the full picture and finish a puzzle when there's a bunch of other pieces in place than when there's no pieces. And I think that the peace deal between Israel and the UAE is that first puzzle piece that maybe you can start working off of and start building to that full picture.
Yeah, I can certainly see that. I think that it'll take some time to figure out all of this stuff that's going on in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. I think that they're going to go through a similar transformation as we went in the United States and the West, where they start to become a little bit more progressive. They start to become more accepting of different ideologies. Not that they're not accepting of different ideologies, even though there are some in those countries, but there's some in the United States too. Yeah. I think that, say, like 20, 25 years, 50 years even maybe, I think that you'll see those countries, because you've already seen them, like Saudi Arabia has seen a total economic transformation. Mm-hmm. UAE, total economic transformation. Yeah. Like, I think give it some time, and like I think a lot of the differences in war in the Middle East is going to be solved organically. That being said, the United States, Russia, China, all these countries can't continue to get involved in the
Playing
Middle East.
proxy wars in, I mean, the Middle East and Africa has never benefited.
Dude, we killed the leader.
Proxies.
Right. We killed the leader of, I believe it was Libya, Muammar
It just doesn't
Gaddafi.
work. Yeah, it just doesn't
They are
work.
selling slaves in the streets of the capital city.
Yeah, and it never, and
he was a terrible guy. He was a dictator. He was a murderer. But guess what? Those terrible guys usually maintain control of their country better than the freaking Hillary Clinton in the State Department does.
Yeah, and it doesn't. Yeah, the proxy wars never. I mean, we've seen that since, I mean, the Cold War. The proxy wars have never led to anything good. I mean, Korea, Vietnam, none of those. I mean, Vietnam's doing well now.
Are they still communist?
Because I don't think so.
I don't think
but
so
it's
either.
because things didn't work out in the proxy war. Like, the proxy war didn't go how the one in Korea went, where the two countries held their lines, the communist and like democracy people countries held the line in the middle, and now we have North Korea and South Korea. And North Korea is a horrible place, and South Korea is doing well, but that came from not from the war. That didn't come from the war.
Right. What do you think about, like, human rights violations taking place in a country super duper bad? Do you think it's the responsibility of the United States to get involved?
I think
we're talking really, really bad, like just straight up genocide.
I think that's what the UN is supposed to be for. And if you had a stronger UN that actually like did something and wasn't in bed with places that are committing those human rights violations, because I think it's difficult to say like just the United States should be responsible for it. I think the United States should play a part in it, but I think that's why you need an organization like the UN to deal with stuff like that.
Yeah, but it's become powerless, right? It would take another, like, I think that there's going to be another organization after the UN that'll have serious power. I think the UN at some point will be dissolved. In the United States, we'll have a major leader that wants to pull out of the UN, and it'll start a chain of countries dropping out. And I think there will be something new that gets started that has a lot more control and power. Not that I want that. I'm not a globalist, and I'm sure you would probably want that more than I. But I think that it's already been proven that the UN can't get anything done. That's been proven. I mean, the United States by alone, without any other country, can get more done than the United States, than the UN, I mean, in other countries. Think about that. The United States, a sovereign country, can get more done in other countries than the UN can.
I think the UN, the way you could fix that, and obviously we're just two like teenagers in Utah spitballing about massive issues that, I mean, people have been trying to solve for a long time, but I think one possible solution is to give the UN more power to punish, like economically.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if they could do that, right now, I mean, the UN can pass a resolution that does absolutely nothing to a country, and it's on member countries to do stuff in their own country that to punish those, to carry out the UN resolution. If you gave the UN the ability to do that type of stuff and say, our members are going to refuse to trade with your country or are going to impose a 20% tariff on everything you do, I mean, how quickly would China stop having concentration camps? Would you get changes? But until they do that, it's just a toothless organization that won't really get anything done.
I think that there should be like you said, we're just spitballing, but I think there should be like a 3-strike rule where, like, if you engage in human rights violations 3 times, you should be kicked off the Security Council. Like, that seems like a pretty interesting solution to me, because I tell you what, China and Russia should not be on the Security Council, and I know that that's coming from the perspective of a Western person from the United States, but they have engaged in human rights violations for years. There is no time in United States history, actually that's not true, The United States, not in recent times, but the United States has definitely committed human rights violations.
Yeah,
When we
but-
put the Japanese in what were
internment
literally
camps, yeah.
they were borderline concentration camps though. Like that was like a dark time in U.S. history. We genocided Native Americans. We put African Americans in slavery.
Yeah.
We
But
put
I would
Japanese
say
in
if we
internment
were
camps.
in the UN Security Council, then we should be kicked out. Like,
Yeah,
you shouldn't
yeah,
be in
exactly.
that, right?
Yeah.
And so when you see other countries doing stuff, I mean, on that level, close to that level, I mean, more than that level, they shouldn't. I mean, China, I mean, the first thing when the news about the camps for Uyghur Muslims came out, the UN should have said, sorry, like, you're off the council. You can't get away with this.
Can you vote someone off the council? Do you know how that works? I doubt it.
I
bet
don't
you
know.
can't.
Probably not, and it'd probably be super difficult, and politics would get in the way of that. But until you give the UN actual power to punish countries or even help countries. I mean, give them a carrot on a stick to actually like help countries, lead countries, or be able to punish them, because they don't have power to do either right now. You won't get any change that comes from the UN, even though I think that's an organization that could help a lot of people in the long run.
Yeah, I think. What would you think about like? Wait, does the UN have every country? Is North Korea still in the UN? I know they used to be.
I don't know if they have every country. I think they have most. I know they recognize. Does the No.
I think the UN recognizes Palestine as a country.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure how that works. And that, yeah, and you'd have to include, and that's another reason, going back to the Israel-Palestine thing, is why I think a two-state solution would be good, is because then both those countries could kind of advocate, have a voice on the world stage for their people. And so, but yeah, right now you'd need participation from everybody. You'd need a lot of different things to fall into place before that would work. But I think that would be a solution that is way too complicated for us to discuss with our limited knowledge of how those things work. But we'll try. We're going for it.
Yeah.
And we probably couldn't outline every step of the way, but I think that's probably the end goal, to do those things.
All right.
Okay, let's wrap it up.
Oh, that was
Episode
fun, Henry.
4.
I like this episode.
Yep, this has been good.
Episode. I broke this.